Welcome to Janette's I'm Every Woman TV. I'm your host, Janette Burke. And today we have something very special for you. Have you been struggling with the thought of contraception, of having the rights over your own body for abortion or delayed pregnancy or any of those things? Well, let me tell you, you're not alone. And since we are a women's show, I'm very pleased to have with me Dr. John Bart, who is a family practitioner in Toronto and also a new author of a book called Middenrammers, which is going to be released very shortly in about a week's time. Now, Middenrammers is a novel, but it's a very controversial and often graphic novel depicting a doctor by the name of Brian Davies' experiences when he was quite young, a junior doctor in Sweport, Yorkshire, England in the late 1960s at Sweport Maternity Hospital. So the book is very interesting. It follows actually the struggles he faces with his colleagues, many who are Catholic Church supporters, to change deplorable conditions of the Trawler fishermen, and he will explain what that is, in the area at the time, who were leaving behind many pregnant women, and these women were having struggles. So the book details the mission he actually went on, and he didn't go on it alone, he went on it with others, to support women's reproductive rights, and that's really what we're talking about here. The book also details a very intense love story with a nurse named Woody, who is very instrumental in helping the pro-choice movement come to life. So I'll let him tell you more in his interview. Welcome, Dr. Bart.
Welcome, thank you.
All right, so please tell us what the basic principle of Middenrammers is and why you chose to use it as a title for your book and write the book at this time in your life.
Middenrammers is a Yorkshire dialect and it means garbage men. And sometime in the book that's what the protagonists are called by different people. The protagonists are in favor of women having easy access to abortion and to contraception. And in the small seaport that they find themselves in, Sweport it's called, it's okay. Both access to contraception and abortion is extremely difficult or forbidden. And to change that, they have to make movement. They have to change the circumstances around them, which is much harder than it looks, of course. To get the point over, the novel describes what happens to several different women when they don't have access to either termination of pregnancy or contraception. And the graphic detail that you describe arises because as a family physician, as a physician, one has a different point of view from the patient, and you see things quite differently. Although the outcome is the same, the way you see what's happening is completely in a different way.
So why did you choose to write this book now? I mean, this is a pretty fair question. You've been in practice a lot of years. You've been in Canada over 40 years. You've been in private practice. Why now? Why now? Why didn't you write this book years ago?
No time.
No time.
Right.
Okay.
As a family man and a family doctor, I had no time.
Right.
But I have a bit more time now, and I wanted to write it. And now I believe the point has to be rammed home as hard as you can, that women have an absolute right to have control over their bodies. Their right to their reproductive rights must be enshrined everywhere. I mean, a lot of America disagrees with it. Large parts of South America are absolutely opposed to it. It was disgraceful that a child of 11 who was fathered by a stepfather was not allowed to have a termination of pregnancy because the Constitution and the Church were against it. That is beyond belief, really beyond belief. And to make sure that that doesn't happen here, I wanted to point out what happens to women when they don't have access to their own rights over their own body.
Right. Okay, so getting into the book itself, how much of the book is actually about you, your life, and your personal experiences from a physician's or medical point of view?
I'm not Brian Davies, and what I've seen others go through is what forms the essence of the book. In 40 years of practice, which I have had, you see a lot as a physician, and it comes together when you want to write something. You can select from your experiences examples that make the point.
Okay, so one of the biggest contentions that you make throughout the book, and yes, I have read it to some extent, is that women's...
Good.
I did. You contend that women's reproductive rights, even in today's modern world, obviously it was written in the 60s, but in today's modern world, is a myth, that we actually do not have reproductive rights. Could you explain or, delve deep into that? Why do you think that maybe reproductive rights for women is a myth?
Well, if they're not a myth, it's extremely difficult in circumstances. In Metro Toronto, for instance, they were picketing Morgenthaler's abortion clinic without any hesitation, as if it was a perfect thing to do, as if it's proper for them to do that. Well, of course, it's absolutely improper for them to do it. What women need is counselling before they go through with the termination of pregnancy. They need safe circumstances to have termination of pregnancy, and they need counselling afterwards.
Right,
all those
it's
things
deeply
should be
emotional.
Yes, absolutely. It's you lose a child even if you're the person who institutes the loss. Women are entitled to have protection through those circumstances. Otherwise, what is society for?
Correct. Now, I mean, there's also the circumstance of rape, which does happen quite a lot, and in many cases leaves a woman pregnant, and obviously they don't want that child. I understand the statistic is 1 in 4 of North American women are assaulted. Right. So, in which case, if a pregnancy results, they probably do have the right to decide if they want to carry that child or not.
Well, you would think it would be absolutely okay everywhere, but it's not so long ago that 2 doctors had to say yes before a woman could have a termination of pregnancy. That's 2 strange people should say to you, yes, you can have a termination of pregnancy, which you want.
Right. So, I mean, age, sexual assault, these are 2 factors. There are other factors in determining whether or not to carry a baby to term. Sometimes a woman's health is at risk.
Yes. But the essential point is that the woman should be able to decide whether she should have one or not.
That is correct.
It's nobody else's business. She's entitled to have counselling, and probably she should be counselled before she goes through with it to see whether it's a genuine need on her part. But it's her decision whether she should do that or not.
Okay, I'm not disputing that. So
I'm glad to hear it.
I do believe that women should have a right to choose. And if motherhood is something that is not for them,
well, you believe it and I believe it, but there are large swaths of the country that don't believe it.
Yes, that's true, but
well, then they have to be shown what happens to the women when they don't get it.
Okay, so let's talk about it. What happens when women who are forced to have a child that do not want or need or should be having the child, what happens to them?
It changes the course of their life.
And how so?
In any way that you can possibly imagine. Economically, emotionally, the right to live the life that the way they wish to is taken away from them.
And I would go one farther and argue that a woman who is forced to have a child, not only does it affect her life, but it may also affect the child's life, because if she doesn't want the child and she shows resentment through the whole time, then how's that good for the child either? Most
of the time women want the child. That's not the issue. It's extremely difficult to be a single mother.
Oh yes, yes.
There's no other way to say it. So we should protect women if they don't want to take that course in their life. We should help them. They should have the right to do with their bodies what they wish. Okay. Nobody says that abortion is the right thing to do. It's the lesser of 2 evils. But believe me, it is the lesser of 2 evils. Okay, well, some people, it's not about that abortion is not the right thing to do. It's that some people feel that abortion or reproductive rights is an excuse for not using protection. Well, that may be true sometimes. Nevertheless, the net result is the woman has the choice not to have the child that she's conceived. Okay, so let's get back to the book, please. So there are many shining examples depicted throughout the book's 25 chapters of what really happens to women and children when they don't have the right to choose. So one such incident involves a 15-year-old girl that gave birth to a baby on her kitchen table.
What is the significance of this event, and what should women know about this? Like, why did you choose to include it in the book?
Well, I actually saw that one.
I actually
saw that event. We were called out to see. The parents of the child didn't know she was pregnant. I'm not sure that she knew that she was pregnant until the very last minute. And then we were called, and she was in full labor in the middle of her home. We couldn't transfer her to the local hospital, and the only place that she could be delivered was on the kitchen table. The reason that she fell pregnant was because there was no contraception used when she and her boyfriend made love. So contraception was difficult in those days to obtain. In Canada, in this time, you can buy contraceptives in every pharmacy. In the 1960s in Britain, when this is written, it was just the era when the only place you could buy a contraceptive was in the barber shop. A boy had to go into the barber shop. And believe me, when a boy went into the barber shop and asked for a contraceptive, everybody looked around and started to laugh. So there was a
humiliation.
Yes, absolutely. So the net result is that horrible event. She was very lucky, that girl.
Yes, she could have died on that table.
Yes, she could. But my boss, the guy who was doing the delivery, was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, with really just bare intelligence. He produced, and what's more, the child was breech.
Oh, complicated,
a primate breech on the kitchen table. You're never going to see that again.
Right, so hopefully they did well and survived.
Yes, but I'm sure that kind of thing still happens where contraception is not available.
In certain countries such as South America, for example?
I suppose.
Yes.
And parts of Canada, I suppose, sometimes.
Right, maybe, remote areas, maybe particularly where, they're like Inuit areas or...
Well, I have no idea about that.
But practice, we do hear this on the news a lot about these things happening in these type of communities. And it's very unfortunate, actually.
Like Metro Toronto, you mean?
Outside of Metro Toronto, in parts of Canada that are more remote, where where they're really suffering. And actually, there's actually a lot of suicide reports about women in predicaments in those areas because they can't take care of their children. They keep having them, but they can't take care of them.
Yes, and that's a true bill.
That is a true bill. Okay, so let's also say that this book is a love story. It's also a love story. I mean, we're a women's show. We love love stories, right?
Yes.
Woody is a main character. She's the senior nurse in the book. She is significant for various reasons, particularly in showing the need for women to support other women, which we don't always have that. And I would like you to comment on, do you feel there is enough medical support in the medical community amongst nurses and doctors, including female doctors? Do they support women enough? Do they support their women patients enough? Do they make it easy enough for them to make these type of choices?
Well, in this day and age, most of the doctors in Canada, the majority is now are women. And yes, they do support the women around them. And I'm sure the men do too. I don't see anything other than that they support them. But it's difficult to act in a community where the principles are against what you believe.
Right, but in this context, going back to the 60s, a lot of women nurses, and I guess mostly nurses because there weren't that many women doctors in that time frame, but the women nurses were very harsh and judgmental on women who went in and had abortions or tried to fight for their rights or even gave birth and then took their children away.
Yes, that's true. I understand that that's the case.
Yeah, that was the case, and it is still somewhat of the case in some parts of the world. So the book is very interesting. It has a lot of intricate parts. I'd like you to share with me now something like anything that you want to share with us about the book that we haven't already talked about, or about reproductive rights for women's choice that we haven't already talked about.
Well, the other theme that runs through the book is the distinction between the rights of the poor and the rights of the rich.
Right. So let's talk about that. It's a good one. Yeah.
The trawler men described in the book in East Yorkshire, where a lot of the trawlermen worked, were treated appallingly by the rich, by the people that the rich were represented by the ship owners. They treated the men appallingly. They gave them bare minimum wage. They sent them out to work in horrific conditions. And it was only because the women, led by a woman called Lily Bilocker,
Another key character in the book, yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of information about Lily Bolocka, but what she did was, she got you have to understand that men were dying every year out at sea because the conditions that they worked under were poor. So in the end, Lily Bolocka got the women in her town, Hull, together, and they decided that they were not going to make love to their men until the conditions were better. And once the newspapers got hold of this, it became a big fuss, and eventually she engineered enough of a change so that the conditions for the men started to improve.
And you know what? She wouldn't be the first rebellious woman to do that type of a thing. In fact, much change for women and women's rights are the result of suffragettes who fought for the same thing.
I think that was done originally in ancient Greece. A bunch of women did that as well.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay. So it worked, right? It's a good publicity stunt, but it's
very difficult. She and the women had to go through a lot to produce change.
And that is tradition throughout history that happens, but it does work. It gets the change done. So, so good for that. Now, the book actually will be released next week. We have a reading coming up on May 10th. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that as well?
Yes, it's at the Dora Kiosk Pub in Toronto.
On the Danforth?
Yes. And there's also a reading in Calgary and one in Edmonton.
Oh, so you're going to have some travel plans coming up.
Apparently, yes.
Yeah. And also I'd like to make mention of where we can actually purchase a copy of Middenrammers. And I believe you can visit www.freehandbooks.com to get a copy, an advance copy.
Yes, you can. Or you can go to any good bookstore, Chapters Indigo, any private smaller bookstore, or you can get it from Amazon on the net. So wherever you wish to go ahead and get it, I hope you do.
Okay, and is the book selling for a certain price point?
I think the Canadian price is $21.95, I'm told.
Okay, so a very good read, very informative, $21.95, talking about women's reproductive rights. Is a very important issue, ladies.
And it's an eye-opener.
It's an eye-opener. Okay, well, it's always nice to end on a zinger note.
Yes.
All right, I want to thank you for being with me today.
Thank you for having me.
And you're welcome. And I want to thank you for being with us today. Please remember to like, comment, and share all our posts on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, Google+, Vimeo, hashtag Janette's I'm Every Woman TV. And until next time, continue to be fabulous. I want to give a shout out to my friend Vicky Cashen over at Lavender Lily Boutique. She is providing the clothes for tonight, and she has some lovely stuff, Canadian-made stuff, very good quality. Please visit her at www.lavenderlily.net. She's located in Thornhill on John Street, and you can find the address and phone number at www.lavenderlily.net.